Welcome, everyone. So let's kick things off with some numbers here. 4.35 million, 9.44 million, and 83%.
Yeah, those are some pretty big numbers.
They are, and they're not winning lottery numbers, unfortunately, but they do paint a picture of the kind of world we're living in when it comes to data, the financial risks that are out there, and just how often we're hearing about these data breaches.
Mm.
It's something that we can't ignore.
Yeah, for sure. I mean, when you see that the average cost of a data breach is globally over $4 million, and then in the US it more than doubles, that gets your attention.
Absolutely. And
Yeah.
it's not just a one-time thing. I mean, 83% of organizations have had more than one data breach. So this is like a recurring nightmare for a lot of companies.
Yeah, it really is. It's not just something that happens once and then you move on. It's something you have to constantly be aware of and be prepared for.
So how do we even begin to wrap our heads around this? Where do we start?
Well, a good place to start is with a solid data security governance plan.
Okay, a governance plan. So what does that actually look like?
It's kind of like the blueprint for how you're going to protect your data. So think of it like this. You wouldn't build a house without blueprints, right?
No way.
Well, same goes for your data security. You need a solid plan in place. And the first step is creating a data security policy.
So this policy is like the ground rules, what's sensitive, what's not.
Exactly. It defines what data you have, what's considered sensitive and needs extra protection, and what's maybe not as critical. You have to be able to differentiate between, the keys to the kingdom and the lunchroom menu.
Right. Not everything needs Fort Knox level security.
Right. And to figure out what level of protection, you need a data classification system.
Okay, data classification. So this is where we categorize everything.
Yeah, you create different categories for your data based on its sensitivity. You might have highly confidential, internal use only, and public, and having these categories helps you determine the right level of protection for each type of data.
Got it. So now we know what we have and how sensitive it is, but where is it all? Data lives everywhere these days.
It really does. That's where data discovery comes in. It's about finding all the places where your sensitive data lives. And it's not just in the obvious places like databases.
Oh, I bet. So we're talking about like files and emails and spreadsheets and all that.
Exactly. Sensitive information can be lurking in those places too. Think about it. You've got employees saving spreadsheets on their desktops. Maybe they have customer data in there. It's everywhere.
Yikes, that's scary. So how do we find all this hidden data?
Well, one way is to monitor your network traffic. See what data is being transmitted and if it's being done securely. And there are tools for this data loss prevention, or DLP technologies.
Hmm.
Yeah, it's like having a security guard for your data. It scans for sensitive information that's trying to leave your network without permission.
Okay, so DLP is watching the exits. What else can we do to get a handle on where all our data is?
You need a good data catalog. Think of it like an inventory of all your data assets. And it needs to be constantly updated because data is always moving and changing.
Makes sense.
Yeah.
Okay, so let's say the worst happens.
Yeah.
Despite all our precautions, we lose data. What then?
That's where a data recovery plan comes in. It's your plan B. It outlines how you're going to restore your data and get your systems back up and running if you have a major data loss event.
Okay, so we've got the groundwork laid. We know data we have, where it is, how sensitive it is. Now, how do we actually protect it?
Now we're talking about protection and compliance, and one of the most important tools in our arsenal is encryption.
Encryption. So we're talking about scrambling the data so no one can read it without the key.
Exactly, and you need to encrypt data both when it's stored at rest and when it's being transmitted in motion. Think about when you do online banking. That connection is encrypted to protect your financial information as it travels over the internet.
Right, so encryption is like putting your data in a locked safe and then putting that safe in an armored truck.
Exactly. But you have to manage those keys very carefully. If you lose the key, the encryption is useless.
So key management is crucial. What are some best practices for that?
Well, first of all, those keys need to be generated randomly, no predictable patterns, and you need to rotate your keys regularly and re-encrypt data with the new keys.
So keeping those keys safe and changing the locks frequently.
Right. And we also have to start thinking about the future and the threat of quantum computing.
Quantum computing, how does that affect encryption?
Well, quantum computers are incredibly powerful, and they could potentially break a lot of the encryption we use today. So we need to start developing new quantum-safe encryption algorithms.
Wow, so it's like we're in an arms race with the future.
In a way, yeah. But encryption is just one layer of protection. We also need strong access control.
Access control. So making sure only authorized users can get to the data.
Right. Strong passwords, multi-factor authentication, and making sure people only have access to the data they absolutely need.
So it's like having a security guard at the door, checking IDs and making sure everyone belongs there.
Exactly. And then we have data backups. You absolutely need to have regular backups of your data.
Backups, that's like our safety net, right? If we lose data, we can restore it from the backup.
Exactly. And it's not just about traditional disaster recovery. Backups are also essential for protecting against ransomware attacks.
Oh, right. Because if someone encrypts all your data and demands a ransom, you can just restore from a backup.
Exactly. Backups can be your lifeline in those situations. And then there's the whole issue of compliance.
Compliance. So we're talking about all the rules and regulations that companies have to follow, right?
Right. Things like GDPR, HIPAA, PCI DSS. There are all sorts of regulations depending on your industry and where you operate.
And there are hefty fines for non-compliance, right?
Absolutely. So you need to be able to demonstrate that you're following the rules. And don't forget, some regulations like GDPR have a global reach. So even if you're not based in Europe, if you handle European citizens' data, you still have to comply.
So data protection is a global issue.
It really is. And finally, you need a good data retention policy.
Data retention. So how long do we keep different types of data?
Right. You don't want to keep data longer than necessary. It's a liability. The longer you keep it, the more it costs to store and the greater the risk if it gets compromised.
So it's like cleaning out your closet. Get rid of the stuff you don't need anymore.
Exactly. Okay, so we've talked about preventing breaches and protecting data, but what happens when, despite our best efforts, something does get through?
Right. We have to be realistic. No system is perfect. So how do we detect and respond to these incidents?
Well, detection is about constantly monitoring your systems, looking for anything unusual, like a burglar alarm going off.
And we're looking for patterns of activity that seem suspicious, right?
Exactly. And there are tools that can help us with this. Things like user behavior analytics, or UBA.
UBA.
Yeah, it uses AI to analyze user behavior and spot anomalies. So for example, if someone starts downloading huge amounts of data late at night that they've never accessed before, UBA can flag that as a potential security incident.
So it's like having a really smart security camera that can recognize unusual behavior.
That's a good analogy. And when these systems detect something suspicious, they generate alerts, and then the response phase begins.
So what happens when an alert goes off?
Well, the first step is to investigate the alert and figure out what's going on. And a lot of organizations use dynamic playbooks to guide their response.
Playbooks.
Yeah, they're like step-by-step guides, but they're dynamic so they can adapt based on the situation.
So it's not just a rigid set of rules. It can adjust based on what you find during the investigation.
Exactly. And the goal of the response is to contain and eradicate the threat and restore your systems quickly as possible. And while automation is great for known types of attacks, sometimes you need human intervention.
Right, you can't automate everything. Sometimes you need a human expert to analyze the situation and make decisions.
Exactly. So we've covered a lot of ground here. We've talked about the financial impact of data breaches, the importance of governance discovery, protection, compliance detection, and response.
It's a lot to take in, but it's clear that data security is a complex and multifaceted issue. There's no silver bullet.
Definitely not. But research has shown that there are 5 key areas where organizations can focus their efforts to reduce the cost of a data breach.
Oh, that's interesting. What are those 5 things?
Number 1 is using AI. AI can play a huge role in data security, from threat detection to analyzing security events to even predicting attacks.
Right. AI can sift through mountains of data and spot patterns that humans might miss. What's number 2?
Number 2 is implementing DevSecOps. It's about integrating security into the software development process from the very beginning.
So baking security in from the start rather than trying to bolt it on later.
Exactly. Number 3 is having a strong incident response capability. Being prepared to quickly and effectively detect, contain, and recover from security incidents is crucial.
So it's not just about preventing breaches, it's also about minimizing the damage when they do happen.
Right. Number 4 is strong cryptography. Using encryption to protect your sensitive data, even if someone does manage to get access to it.
So rendering the data useless to attackers.
Exactly. And finally, number 5 is employee training.
Ah, the human factor.
Exactly. You can have the best technology in the world, but if your employees aren't trained on security best practices, you're still vulnerable.
Right, a phishing email can bypass all sorts of technical defenses.
Absolutely. So those are the 5 key areas where organizations can focus their efforts to reduce the cost of a data breach.
Well, it's clear that data security is an ongoing journey. It's not something you can just check off your list and forget about.
Definitely not. It's a continuous process of improvement.
Well, thinking back to those numbers we started with, the millions of dollars lost and the high probability of repeated incidents, it's a stark reminder of why this is so important.
Absolutely. And it's a good time to take stock of your own organization's security posture. Are you confident in your data governance? Do you know where all your sensitive data is? What steps can you take to improve your defenses?
These are all important questions, and hopefully this discussion has given our listeners some food for thought.
I hope so.
Well, thank you for joining us and sharing your expertise.
It was my pleasure.
And to our listeners, thanks for tuning in. Until next time, stay safe out there in the digital world.